Hi guys, it's Smiles again here. We've had quite a lot of new cards spoiled today, some really interesting cards. We finally got to see the full set of cartouches, which I'm really excited about. So we're going to jump in and talk about those first. I've also realised that I've seen a few key cards over the last few days that have been spoiled that I haven't talked about them in the video, so like the Cycle lands for instance, we're going to talk about those quickly as well. So as expected, after we saw the Cartouche of Solidarity, they're all relatively low mana cost Aura Cartouche cards that enchant a creature. All of them have a small effect when they enter the battlefield, as well as giving the creature a buff. I definitely think that the white, blue and red ones are more playable than the green and black, just because of the converted mana cost and the abilities that they provide to the creatures. Then alongside the Cartouche cards, we've also had Trials, all the different colours spoiled. All of these do something when they enter the battlefield, and on top of that you can return them back to your hand whenever you play any Cartouche Aura card. I think the green, white and black are all the most playable here. The blue one's a little pricey, especially for the effect. The red one again is a little bit pricey. The black one though I see being really potent, especially if you combine it with potentially the white Cartouche. You know, you'll drop this, make them sack a creature, drop the white Cartouche on another creature you control. That will give you a creature token as well, and you've got a buffed creature. You return this trial back to your hand, replay it, make your opponent sack another creature, and at that point you're going to have two blockers, one of which has first strike and is +1/+1. Trial of Solidarity in a weenie deck could be dropped repeatedly. You know, you could play it, get the buff, swing, drop a Cartouche, play it again on the following turn. I mean, if you had enough mana you could play this twice with a Cartouche in between, but that's highly unlikely. Maybe that's more achievable in Limited. Then we have the Amonkhet land cycle, and they are just that, they are a cycle with cycling. A lot of people are calling them tandems or bicycle lands. I don't know whether or not it's going to stick or not. But each of them has both of the basic land types, so they're all fetchable with fetch lands in Modern and Legacy. I think they mentioned the battlefield tapped isn't great, but I think in Legacy maybe irrigated farmland and fetid pools are playable because they're an island. You could fetch them, bring them onto the battlefield, use days to counter an opponent's spell, and then play it tapped for the turn. That sort of thing. So or obviously then you'd have it in your hand so that you could cycle it. A lot of the time in Legacy you have low converted mana cost cards, you don't really need to get that much land out, so you don't mind fetching a land just to then cycle it to draw another card. There's no way these are anywhere near fixing the revised list issue we have with Legacy at the moment, where there's just not enough dual lands to go around all the players, and it hikes the price up to incredible levels. But I mean, this cycle and the Battle for Zendikar cycle are making headway. There's room for players to build budget builds for Legacy that includes those lands instead of shocks. There's not much more to discuss. These cards are pretty self-explanatory. Next up, we got some new split cards. We have Rags to Riches, Cut to Ribbons, and Insult to Injury. Rags is a board sweeper that allows you to take your opponent's remaining creatures. Cut deals 4 damage to target creature. Ribbons allows you to pay X and make each opponent lose X life. Insult to Injury is quite cool, especially the art choice here. The artwork for Insult reminds me of Dictator of the Twin Gods, which has a similar effect, doubling all damage from all sources you control this turn. The other side, Injury does straight up damage to the player and a creature. Nothing too incredible there. So we've got a big batch of white cards to talk about here. First of all, we have Renewed Faith, which is an instant for 2 and 1 white. You gain 6 life. It has the option of cycling it for 1 and 1 white, and then when you do so, you gain 2 life still. I feel like if the main effect was to do something that other than gain life, and then the cycling gains you life, that could be usable, but straight up life gain cards just never really see much play. Next up we have Aven Mind Sensor, which I'm incredibly excited about. I've been looking to pick up a playset of these for a long time, and it's not so much the cost that's put me off, it's just the fact that I'm going to be using them in Modern Hate Bears or potentially Legacy Hate Bears. But now with the release of this, I can buy a playset Future Sight Aven Mind Sensors and then use them in Standard. If you're not already familiar with this card, Aven Mind Sensor is a reprint. It was from an old set called Future Sight. In Future Sight, they printed cards that they said would then be printed again in the future, so it was kind of like the set was predicting the future of the game, which is quite an interesting concept. Either way, it's a 3 mana 2/1 flyer with flash. That doesn't seem great, but just that ability by itself is pretty good. A 2/1 flyer with flash for 3 is pretty good, and then it has the ability to restrict your opponent's library searches. If they would search their library for a card, they only get to search the top 4 cards of their library. Now, interestingly, we haven't seen many cards so far for Amonkhet that allow you to search the library, but the way I like to talk about this sort of printing is as I'm kind of expecting that the next set, or the set after that, will include a lot of sort of deck searching themes. So this card is a reprint now, so it holds value because players want to get hold of a play set, and then in future it's going to have value because it's going to be playable in standard. So I don't think it's going to be playable immediately, other than just, for the ability to have a 2/1 flyer with flash. Next up, the MVP, we have Gideon of the Trials. Very interesting Planeswalker. He's 1 and 2 white, so 3 converted mana cost, Planeswalker Gideon. He has a +1, which says, until your next turn, prevent all damage target permanent would deal. This ability kind of answers at the Flux Reservoir, but not really. If anything, it just holds the opponent off for a turn. But I can see it having more prevalence in future as well. He has a 0 ability, which says until the end of turn, Gideon of the Trials becomes a 4/4 human soldier creature with indestructible. He is still a Planeswalker, prevent all damage that will be dealt to him this turn. Pretty standard Gideon ability there, pretty much on every Gideon card we've seen printed. Then we have his ultimate, which also costs 0. It reads, you get an emblem with, as long as you control a Gideon Planeswalker, you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. So I think this is very interesting. I've already been messaging a few people looking to try and build a deck based around Gideon of the Trials, Phyrexian Metamorph, that sort of thing. So, drop the 0, make the emblem the following turn, make him a creature, copy that creature, and, I don't know, give it some equipment that has Shroud or Hexproof. So if you can protect that creature and your opponent doesn't have a way of interacting with it, you can just sit there and say, we're going to mill each other out. It's one of those scenarios where if your opponent has an answer, you can fight it out. If they don't have an answer, they're just going to concede there and then. I think, interestingly, this might even be played as a one-of in Mardu vehicles alongside the Ally of Zendikar Gideons, because then they can just drop this emblem and then just carry on using their Ally of Zendikars. It gives them a little edge, and I mean, this is worth having in the main board as a one-off because of its +1, and also 3 mana 4/4 indestructible that can't be dealt damage. That's pretty good anyway. That's these 4 is one we've seen days and days ago. I think it was me actually being the first card spoiled for Amonkhet, which is Unwavering Initiate. I didn't include it in my first video. Just an Embalm guy. He's Vigilance 3/2. I don't like the fact that he's a 3/2 with Vigilance. I'd rather have one who's kind of like Toughness heavy rather than attack heavy. Moving on, we're going to wrap up with a few more cards here. We got Prowling Serpapard, which is one I missed a few days ago as well. It's a 4/3 for 3 in green, 1 and 2 green. Prowling Serpapard cannot be countered, and creature spells you control cannot be countered while he is in play. This reminds me of Skylasher, Mistcutter Hydra, that sort of thing, Thron the Last Troll. That we see this sort of theme on green cards come up quite often, and only a few of them are actually playable. This is almost exclusively a sideboard card. I mean, a 4/3 for 3 isn't bad, but you've got better options like Greenwheel Liberator, or even some of the other green cards we've seen printed in this set. There's a lot of excitement surrounding the card at the minute, and I'll believe it when I see it. Then we have Floodwaters, again just another trash common, cycling 2, so it's, worst case scenario you can just draw another card, but it says 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue, return up to 2 creatures to their owner's hands. Incredibly weak ability for that sort of mana cost. I can only imagine that mana cost is trying to offset the fact that it has cycling, but what can we expect from a common really? Then we have As Foretold, which is kind of a brain in the jar type deal, but on an enchantment. I quite like this card so far. It's 2 and 1 blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on for As Foretold. I think the beauty of this is that if you can get the counters high enough, you can just cast something for free every turn. And I think in certain decks, especially in Modern, you're not going to struggle to get the counters up on this if you were trying to do that. In Standard, we have things like Sky Pyra and Animation Module that are going to help get counters on it. This could actually go quite nicely in a deck with Oracle's Vault, because they both kind of do the same thing, but it means you've got 2 different outlets. This is the last batch of cards we have to look at here. First of all, we have Combat Celebrant. He's 2 and 1 red. If he hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it when it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control, and after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. This sort of thing is something that Wizards have been trying to push recently, and it's been a mechanic you can pull off for quite a long time with other cards. It just doesn't seem to get much play, but I think given that he's a 4/1 and he can actually go infinite with Kiki Jiki in Modern, that's been sort of doing the rounds on the internet over the last few hours. I think we're more likely to see the combo pulled off with this card than any of the other cards that give you an additional combat phase. Maybe we'll see it played in like an aggro or a mid-range red deck in standard, you know, with using Hazaret and Skyship Stalker, Lathnu Hellion, those sort of creatures. Last couple of cards here, Scarab Feast, 1 black, it's an instant, exile up to 3 target cards from a single graveyard, has 1 black cycling. And then we have Painful Lesson, which is 2 and 1 black. It's a sorcery, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. If you pick this card in sealed or limited, do not forget that you can target your opponent with it. Sign in Blood has the exact same effect, but it's 2 black. But I've seen games before where people could have just won outright by casting Sign in Blood, targeting their opponent to push that last 2 damage, and they've not seen it. So just keep that in mind anytime you've got this card in your deck. That's everything I got for now. I think given that Wizards are throwing a lot of spoilers at us now, we're getting a lot of commons, a lot of trash that we don't really need to be talking about. I think what I'm going to do is ignore those cards, pick out the rares and the cards that really shine, and then maybe do a wrap-up video for each colour covering all the commons for sealed and limited purposes. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, subscribe. Comment below on the sort of thing you'd like to see in future. Tell me your opinions on the cards you've seen. Tell me the sort of cards you'd like me to cover in future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.